4 people slept behind the door of cabin 28 that night, and by morning, only one of them would still be breathing inside those walls. What could make someone spend hours inside a home full of sleeping children and leave some of them completely untouched? This is the story of the Keddie Cabin Murders, a case that has haunted a small mountain town in California for more than 4 decades, and one that to this day has never been solved. Keddie is barely a town at all. Tucked into the Sierra Nevada mountains of Plumas County, it was once a railroad stop, a handful of rustic cabins clustered around an old hotel, a general store, and a bar. By 1981, most of the original railroad workers were gone. What remained was a quiet, close-knit community, the kind of place where everyone recognized everyone else's car. Glenna Sue Sharp moved there in November of 1980. She was 36 years old, a single mother of five, recently separated from her husband. She'd come from Connecticut, in part because her brother lived nearby. She rented Cabin 28, a small 4-room house just off Keddie Station Loop Road. It wasn't much, but it was home. Sue's oldest daughter, Sheila, was 14. Her son, John, was 15. 2 younger boys, Rick and Greg, were 10 and 5. On the night of April 11th, Sheila made plans to sleep over at the neighbor's house, the Seabolts, next door. It was an ordinary decision, the kind any teenager makes on any Saturday night. It may have saved her life. That same evening, John's friend Dana Wingate came over to visit. Dana was 16, a classmate, well-liked, just spending time with a friend on a Saturday. A younger boy from across the road, 12-year-old Justin Smartt, was also there that night, along with Sue's younger sons. Nothing about the evening suggested anything was wrong, but sometime after that, between the late hours of April 11th and the early morning of April 12th, someone entered Cabin 28. The next morning, Sheila walked home to change clothes before church. She expected to find her family getting ready for the day. Instead, she found something no 14-year-old should ever have to see. Inside the living room were the bodies of her mother, her brother John, and Dana Wingate. All 3 had been bound with medical tape and cord. All 3 had been killed with shocking, sustained violence, struck, and in some cases stabbed or strangled. We won't describe the scene in more detail than that. What matters is what it meant. 3 lives ended in a home that showed no signs of forced entry. But this was only the beginning of what investigators would find. In the adjoining bedroom, Sheila discovered her younger brothers, Rick and Greg, along with young Justin Smartt. All 3 were physically unharmed. They had been asleep in the next room while the violence occurred just feet away. And then came the detail that would define this case for the next 4 decades. Sue's 12-year-old daughter, Tina, was nowhere in the house. Investigators arrived to a scene that offered very few easy answers. There was no forced entry. The phone had been left off the hook. Detectives did recover one unidentified fingerprint on a back stairway handrail, but little else that pointed clearly toward a suspect. And then there was the matter of who had been left alive. 3 children sleeping in the very next room had not been touched. Whoever did this had made a choice. Investigators would spend years trying to understand why. Within hours, it became clear that Tina Sharp was missing. This changed everything. What had looked like a triple homicide was now something far more complicated. A possible abduction, layered on top of a massacre. The FBI joined the investigation. But even with federal resources involved, answers were slow to come. Plumas County's sheriff at the time, Doug Thomas, and his lieutenant, Don Stoy, later admitted that the case lacked an obvious motive. Without a motive, they said, a case becomes far harder to crack. Investigators did find physical evidence at the scene, a hammer and knives believed to be the weapons used. But the man who owned that hammer told police it had gone missing just weeks before the murders. That man was Marty Smartt. Smartt lived just across the road, in Cabin 26, with his wife Marilyn and her 2 sons, including Justin, the boy who'd survived the night unharmed in the next room. A friend of Smart's, a man named John Bobubidi, was staying with them at the time. sleeping on the couch. According to witnesses, Smartt, Boobede, and Marilyn had all been at the local bar that Saturday night. Marilyn went home and went to sleep. The two men, witnesses said, returned to the bar and were seen coming back to the cabin later that night. Marilyn would later say that she woke sometime after 2 a.m. to find the two men burning something in the wood stove. Investigators questioned Smartt. According to reports, a polygraph examiner determined that he had failed key questions, but the sheriff's office reportedly told the public and later journalists that Smartt had passed. That discrepancy would not come to light for years. Soon after the interview, Smartt and Boobede left Keddie for Oregon. Not long after, Smartt allegedly sent his wife a letter. In it, he suggested, without ever using the word murder, that he had sacrificed everything, including 4 lives, because of what their marriage had cost him. That letter was never entered as evidence at the time. Years later, a mental health counselor reportedly came forward, saying Smartt had confessed to the killings during a therapy session, and that Sue Sharp's involvement in Marilyn's decision to leave him had been the motive. According to the counselor, he alerted authorities. According to reporting on the case, that information was dismissed as hearsay and not formally pursued. Neither Smartt nor Boobede was ever charged. Both men have since died, Boobede in 1988, Smartt in 2000. Because neither was convicted, what we can say is only this: they were named as suspects. Investigators found their behavior suspicious, and questions about their involvement were never resolved in a court of law. And still, Tina Sharp remained missing. For 3 years, Tina's fate was the case's most painful, unanswered question. Was she alive somewhere? Had she been taken by whoever committed the murders? Or was she, too, a victim from that very first night? Then, on April 22, 1984, just over 3 years after the murders, a bottle collector searching near Feather Falls, roughly 100 miles from Keddie, discovered human remains. Part of a skull, part of a jaw. Forensic analysis confirmed what the Sharp family had feared for 3 long years. The remains belonged to Tina. A medical examiner determined that her death had likely occurred sometime after November of 1981, which meant, if that estimate was accurate, that Tina may have still been alive for months after the night her mother and brother were killed. Her exact cause of death has never been publicly confirmed. To this day, no one has been charged in connection with what happened to her. The discovery only deepened the mystery. If Tina had survived the initial attack, who kept her and why? If she hadn't, why was she taken from the scene at all when the other 3 victims were left behind? But the questions didn't stop there. In 2013, more than 3 decades after the murders, a Plumas County deputy going through old evidence boxes found something that should have been examined years earlier, a recording of a 911 call. On it, a man's voice describes a body discovered in connection with the case. For reasons that have never been fully explained, that call was never investigated when it came in. It sat unheard for years. Then, in March of 2016, investigators located a hammer submerged in a pond near where Cabin 28 once stood. Forensic testing matched it, through Dana linked to Justin Smartt, to the very hammer Marty Smartt had reported missing before the murders. Investigators believe it had been deliberately hidden. In 2018, Dana recovered from a strip of medical tape at the crime scene. Tape consistent with what had bound the victims was reportedly matched to a living suspect. Investigators have said they believe at least 2 people who were involved may still be alive today, decades later, and have never faced any consequences. Despite the Dana evidence, despite the recovered hammer, despite the letter and the alleged confession, no arrests have ever been made in the Keddie murders. Some researchers and journalists have raised harder questions still about whether local law enforcement in a small and insular community mishandled the case from the very beginning. Evidence that should have been preserved was lost. Leads that should have been followed were reportedly ignored. Whether this was incompetence, misfortune, or something else, remains, like the case itself, unresolved. Cabin 28 stood empty for years after the murders. Locals said no one wanted to live there. Stories spread that the property was cursed. In 2004, the county finally demolished it, along with several other condemned buildings on the site. Today, only a small marker remains, a quiet reminder for those who know to look of what happened there. Sheila Sharp, the 14-year-old girl who found her family that April morning, is still alive today. So are her younger brothers. They have spent their entire adult lives without answers, without a trial, without a conviction, without the simple certainty of knowing who did this to their family. Marilyn Smartt, in a 2008 documentary, said publicly that she believed her former husband and his friend were responsible. She described Marty as having deeply resented John Sharp, but belief is not proof. And in the eyes of the law, this case remains exactly what it was on the morning of April 12, 1981, unsolved. Plumas County investigators have said in recent years that they believe they are closer than ever to closing the case. DNA technology has advanced far beyond what existed in 1981. Evidence once thought lost has resurfaced. But time is not on their side. Witnesses have died, memories have faded, and the two men most often named as suspects are no longer alive to answer for what happened. If you have a theory about who was responsible or who else might still be alive with answers, share it in the comments below. And if you want to see more cases like this one investigated in depth, consider subscribing. More than 40 years later, one question still sits at the center of the Keddie Cabin murders, unanswered. If investigators are right that at least 2 people involved that night are still alive, why after all this time has no one ever been brought to justice?